In the Brentwood section of Los Angeles, in the early morning of June 13, 1994, a dog led some neighbors to the front walk of Nicole Brown Simpson's condominium. There lay the mutilated bodies of Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman. Their killer had slit their throats.
O.J. Simpson was accused of murdering 2 people. And I had been on radio for only a few months. It was a major, major case. You know, O.J. Simpson was the most famous criminal defendant in the history of this country. I mean, he was really famous. He was a star in the NFL. He was a star in movies. That's how much famous this dude was.
My focus, I hope I get more questions so I can give examples about how unfairly the media has reported this and how inaccurately big people in the media, Barbara Walters, Katie Couric, Larry King, I mean, undisputed. They cannot dispute the stories that I'm gonna tell about what they did, that one phone call could have corrected what they were reporting to the public, and they just lied to the public.
All rise for Judge Joe Brown.
Whoa! I want to ask you about O.J. Simpson. Do you feel like he did it or no?
I know Johnny Cochran well. His number's in my phone. I know Johnny Cochran well. I've known him since 1966. He and I discussed what his strategy was. They did not have a case against him.
Nigga, please.
Homicide detective Tom Lang of the Los Angeles Police Department was one of the men in charge of overseeing the evidence collection at the crime scene.
People on death row. Death row. There are people that have indeed been put to death on much, much less evidence, on 1/10 of that evidence.
They did not have a case against him.
On the night in question, O.J. Simpson, in my opinion, murdered 2 people. I mean, the man did everything but leave his business card at the crime scene. You're talking about the footprints that matched his feet. The knit cap had a hair in it that matched the kind of hair he had. There was blood at the crime scene. There was blood on the Bronco. There was a glove, of course, that was found at the crime scene that matched the one that was found at O.J. Simpson's house. Again, the man did everything but leave his business card at the crime scene.
Impound lot guy has just testified that he and his buddies went through the Bronco. There wasn't a drop of blood in it.
At the crime scene, there was blood on the Bronco.
Bloody shoe prints and drops of blood to the left of them led away from the murder scene toward a back alley. Police believed the prints belonged to someone who'd been bleeding from the left hand as he quit the scene. Also found near the bodies were a blood-soaked glove and a pullover cap. The killer had apparently left them behind. It had been secured. The officers called the Homicide Division. Detective Lang received a call at 3 a.m. on the 13th to take charge of the investigation.
There wasn't a drop of blood in it. They went through it with a fine-tooth comb.
The first impression was that it was an overkill, probably some type of rage killing, that there was one killer.
The ground was littered with potential clues. A leather glove, a ski cap, Ronald Goldman's pager, and one set of size 12 shoe prints leading away from the bodies. Detectives had to determine which were important. They started with the blood.
In his book, O.J. Simpson says that he would have taken a bullet or stood in front of a train for Nicole. Man, I'm going to tell you, that is some bad luck when the one guy who would have died for you kills you. That's probably... You don't get worse luck than that.
At the request of his superior, Lang left the crime scene to notify the victim's estranged husband, former football star and broadcaster O.J. Simpson, that his ex-wife had been killed. He traveled the short distance to Simpson's home on North Rockingham Drive with his partner, Phil Van Natter. According to the testimony of Mark Fuhrman at trial, he then noticed a white Ford Bronco outside the gate.
So I'm walking down the street, and there's a white Bronco. And it just seemed like it was parked wrong. As I'm looking on the door, I see some little specks, some streaks of red that looks like blood.
Buddies went through the Bronco. There wasn't a drop of blood in it. They went through it with a fine-tooth comb.
Crime scene reconstructionist Rod Englert.
There was a transfer on that dash which was blood consistent with O.J. Simpson's DNA. But even more remarkable was the console between the passenger seat and the driver's seat. And it had numerous transfer patterns. One was a hand pattern on the back far side of the console, on the console between the passenger seat and the console, which you can see distinctive finger marks, a transfer. And then there's another swipe. These transfers belong to, and it was blood consistent with, the DNA of Ron Goldman and Nicole Simpson.
Cops were drawn to a cut on Simpson's left middle finger, and this is where Simpson's answers started becoming more vague.
How did you get the injury on your hand?
I don't know. Not the first time. I know when I was in Chicago, I know how, but at the house I was just running around.
How did you do it in Chicago?
I broke a glass. One of you guys had just called me, and I was in the bathroom, and I just kind of went bonkers for a little bit.
Is that how you cut it?
It was cut before, but I think I just opened it again. I'm not sure.
Police had found a blood trail from the Bronco to his house. Now Simpson offered a few new details to help explain it.
Do you recall bleeding at all?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was bleeding, but it was no big deal. I bleed all the time. I mean, I play golf and stuff, so there's always something nicks and stuff here and there.
We don't know what direction this is going to take us, but there's enough that I want your blood, I want to document that finger, I want your fingerprints.
All right? The DNA evidence against O.J. is devastating.
The results of DNA analysis in the Simpson case were stunning.
And when I listened to what the expert said, he said, this is not O.J. First off, this is someone similar.
A prosecution expert testified that the drops of blood leading away from the murder scene were probably O.J. Simpson's.
But there are approximately 96,000 people in L.A. County that would match this DNA profile.
The odds the blood came from someone else were calculated at 1 in 170 million.
Reflects someone from Northeast Mediterranean ancestry or perhaps from the island of Sicily.
Blood found on the back gate at the murder scene was also identified as Simpson's. Here, the odds of it being someone else's were 1 in several billion, greater than the population of the planet.
And when I listened to what the expert said, he said, this is not O.J. First off, this is someone similar.
Simpson's blood was also identified on the Bronco's door panel, dashboard, and near the headlight switch. This essentially proved the blood was Simpson's.
But there are approximately 96,000 people in L.A. County that would match this DNA profile.
Here, the odds of it being someone else's were 1 in several billion, greater than the population of the planet. This essentially proved the blood was Simpson's.
Now, it just happens that I know personally the guy that made the gloves. This person told me out his own mouth, and so did Johnny Cochran. They took a tracing of everybody's hand. O.J. is a big dude. I knew him personally from college. And he wore a size, not XL, but 2XL.
It's a damn lie.
Are these photographs that you've seen before?
Yes, they are.
You've examined these photographs before?
Yes, I have. Based on what I've seen, I would say that this is Styles 70263, size extra large brown, knowing that I had measured the defendant's hand.
And how certain are you of that?
I'm 100% certain.
The defining moment of the trial.
He was not trying to push his hand into it. He was doing this. He never really made an effort to get the glove on. So the whole thing was a fiasco.
Remember these words. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. There's a lot of rivalry between the two conferences. I talked to a lot of the guys this week, and they were aware of the fact that they are the one team in the AFC, along with the Raiders maybe, that they felt were physical enough to not get pushed around by these good NFC teams. And they came out here today, and they proved it. And you can see as they went into the locker room, they were yelling, "Super Bowl, bring on Miami."
The glove was a size L, so they knew it wasn't going to fit.
I've seen, I would say that this is Styles 70263, size extra large brown.
But guess who wore a size L? Fuhrman. Guess who found the glove? Fuhrman.
For LAPD Detective Lang, it would have been impossible for Fuhrman to have found the second glove at the scene of the murders because he was the 13th detective to sign the log.
Fuhrman lives 28 miles away. He's off duty. But for some reason, he comes to the scene 5 minutes after the murder occurs.
He was the 13th detective to sign the log.
Because 12 people there before Fuhrman only saw one glove. And it's very logical the way Fuhrman found the glove. He was doing what anybody should have done, following up on an interview with Cato Kalin.
75 feet into OJ's dark backyard, supposedly.
And if you think he's planted evidence or anything else, we need to see evidence of that.
The defense had no real evidence that the glove was planted.
Now, my brother, who did not testify in front of the jury, when he was asked to assess the knife killing, he said, first off, OJ is a right-handed guy. Whoever did this killing is a left-handed person.
This reconstruction is based on Englert's written report as presented to the court. It speculates how the crime may have occurred and how long it might take, assuming the prosecution's theory that O.J. Simpson was the killer. The defense contended that the murders would have involved a prolonged struggle of as much as 15 minutes. The prosecution, however, believed they took a total of 30 seconds.
Said each of the victims, Nicole and Goldman, were struck by a fatal blow with a knife turned sideways that slid in next to the central cartilage in the rib cage that tore up the aorta and upper two chambers of the heart. Then their throats were slit ear to ear, and somebody used some pliers to pull their tongues out through the slit throat. That's called a Colombian necktie.
O.J. Simpson spends an estimated of $5 million on his defense team, and all of a sudden you had all these ridiculous theories about what happened. Colombian neckties, Mark Fuhrman allegedly planted the glove because he was a racist. It was all horse bleep.
The fatal wound, said the chief Los Angeles coroner, a deep slash across her throat.
In this situation, the neck has almost been sliced half from front to back. It's a single edge knife, and the blunt edge would be on the lower part.
His theory? That with one 6-inch knife, the murderer first hit, then stabbed Nicole into unconsciousness, turned to struggle with and kill Ron Goldman, and only then dealt the killing slash to Nicole. Yesterday, he demonstrated it. Today, he described it.
Then their throats were slit ear to ear, and somebody used some pliers to pull their tongues out through the slit throat.
Ron Goldman's autopsy report reveals just how brutal his death really was, but it also shows that he fought hard against the person who killed him. According to the Associated Press, he was at Nicole's house because he volunteered to return a pair of glasses. Investigators concluded that Goldman's death was sadly collateral damage. According to autopsy files, the report specified that Goldman was stabbed multiple times with a sharp object. Goldman endured stab wounds over nearly his entire body. He had injuries to his neck, face, ears, chest, thigh, hands, forearm, and abdominal area. The stab wounds to his neck and torso were what ultimately led to his death. The coroner noted that there was damage to a major neck vein as well as his lung. The reports also revealed that Goldman did not die without a fight. The coroner noted that Goldman had dozens of defensive wounds, mostly found on his hands, face, and upper body.
In the blood, when they took him out on the scene, since he dealt with this kind of forensics, he says there's somebody that has a size 9 shoe and somebody that wore a size 10.5 shoe that's leaving tracks. OJ wears a size 12.
Might imagine. Were you able to form an opinion regarding the size of the shoe, the size of the shoes that caused the shoe prints at the Bundy location?
Yes, I was.
And what's that opinion?
That size was an American size 12.
Somebody that has a size 9 shoe and somebody that wore a size 10.5 shoe that's leaving tracks.
The FBI, during their investigation, had found blood footprints at the murder scene of a pair of Bruno Magli shoes size 12, Simpson's shoe size, but which Simpson denied owning.
O.J. wears a size 12.
It was perpetrated by one person.
And what is that based on?
I observed one distinct set of bloody shoe prints between both victims, leading away from both victims west on the sidewalk, away from the location.
And one set of size 12 shoe prints leading away from the bodies.
There was also evidence that the jury here heard that, by the way, Nancy Grace said nothing about, where O.J. caught her giving a head job to somebody on the couch, having sex with somebody on the couch, and the witnesses all say he was mad, but in the lines of, don't you know that the kids could come down and catch you? Why don't you deal with somebody who's not so broke they don't have an apartment?
But like I said, I knew she was getting a divorce. I knew she was living a single life in her own house with her children. And, that kind of stuff happens every day. People get separated, people get divorced, and life moves on. So I didn't see it as an issue that she had an ex-husband, but apparently he saw it differently. So he started following us instantly. The very first night I got there, as I would never stay the night, I would never, she just refused to allow that to happen. She would never let the kids wake up in the morning and have a stranger in the house. That wasn't her thing. Yep. There was the one famous night when O.J. watched us through the window of the house when he followed us home. But even that night, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever time it was, I went out and got in my car and went back to my place.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty frightening to think that he could have been outside, Sure. He was outside watching us an hour earlier through the window, as we found out the next day. But, I sometimes think to myself, wow, I walked out of that house at 3 in the morning after he watched us through the window of the house. What could have happened to me?
In the video, you can see them video the foot of the bed.
Mr. Willie Ford going up into the bedroom. It's 3:13, which he says is 4:13 because it hadn't been changed. This is 4:13 p.m. on June 13th, 1994.
1:14 on the clock.
In the bedroom, it's 3:13, which he says is 4:13 because it hadn't been changed. This is 4:13 p.m.
Videographer named Willie Ford, a police officer, was here at 4:13. He photographed the entire room. He didn't see any socks.
And they panned the camera around, and where is Fuhrman? You can see through 2 doors into the bedroom. Fuhrman is standing right there at the foot of the bed. 35 minutes later, when crime scene's in there, right where you saw it, 1:14, no socks at all, completely clear, right where you later saw Fuhrman, you see now bloody socks. Now, what's the inference? Fuhrman planted the bloody socks.
If you look at the foot of the bed there, where the socks are supposed to be, you'll see no socks in this video. And you'll recall that Mr. Willie Ford testified about this. And I asked him, well, where are the socks, Mr. Ford? I didn't see any socks. At 4:13, on June 13th, 1994, these socks, they supposedly recovered. These mysterious socks.
Where you saw it, 1:14, no socks at all, completely clear, right where you later saw Fuhrman.
People talk about Fuhrman being one of the investigators. I suppose you could say that initially, but the reality was he was in and out on day one. He had nothing to do with this case after the first day, until the defense found out about him and used him as their foil.
A few minutes later, sir, didn't we tell you you had to leave? Detective Fuhrman, isn't it? Yes, sir. You got to go out of here right now. And they panned the camera around, and where is Fuhrman? You can see through 2 doors into the bedroom. Fuhrman is standing right there at the foot of the bed.
just that crucial area where the socks would have been, you don't see. What's key about Willie Ford being here at 413 is Andrea Mazzola and Dennis Fong in their log show that they collected the socks after 4:30.
You say Mark Fuhrman's the guy. Why don't you take him on?
Because Mark didn't kill Nicole.
Why don't you take him on? Mark
Mark
Fuhrman says he wants me to extend an invitation to you for a national debate, and I'm sure he would be glad to do that.
If he comes on the internet, I'll be glad to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at that point, I think he heard Ron Goldman coming through the front gate, something that he would never be able.
You believe she was struck first?
She'd have to be, just from what the evidence, the way the evidence reads.
Mm-hmm.
There's one real telling part of the evidence. Ron Goldman's shirt had 25 hairs from Nicole on his chest, but there were no hairs from Ron on her body, and that would probably indicate that when he saw her, he ran up to her and cradled her head trying to find out what was wrong with her. I think that's when he was grabbed from the rear by O.J. Simpson, pulled him back into the bushes with his left arm around his throat, and that's probably when the glove was lost. Ron started clawing at his arm, and then he clawed at his head.
And that's when the hat was lost. Mm-hmm. Did you plant the glove?
No, absolutely not.
Could you have planted the glove?
Absolutely impossible.
That is not the way it went down. All that stuff in there was garbage. The jury stayed out less than half an hour from people that I talked to who were present. Later, after I had the show, after I got a chance to look through all of the evidence, because some judge that I had recruited to UCLA happened to be granting me access to look at the pictures and look at the physical evidence. They had absolutely nothing on him but what Nancy Grace put out, and that sleazy woman who has got a history of that kind of behavior convinced the American public that O.J. was guilty, and they didn't have one shred, one scintilla of evidence.
There will be a complete picture that will be simply overwhelming and undeniable of the defendant's guilt.
And they didn't have one shred, one scintilla of evidence.
Shirt of Ron Goldman. We find a head hair like that of the defendant. On the glove found at the defendant's home at Rockingham, we find hair like those of Nicole Brown, hair like those of Ron Goldman, fibers like those from the shirt of Ron Goldman, and fiber like those found in the carpet of the defendant's Ford Bronco.
They didn't have one shred, one scintilla of evidence.
The item number 31 on the console, consistent with a mixture of the defendant and Ron Goldman.
And Nicole Brown Simpson's head was nearly severed from her body. And hours later, when police went to O.J. Simpson's house, well, investigators found that his white Ford Bronco was covered in blood. The DNA test would later link the blood to Nicole Brown Simpson, Ron Goldman, and O.J. Simpson. Bloody socks were also found at the foot of O.J. Simpson's bed. DNA testing would link those socks to Simpson and his ex-wife. Bloody shoe prints were found at the scene of the crime. Well, guess what? They matched O.J. Simpson's shoe size. Blood containing O.J. Simpson's DNA markers. Well, that was found on a back gate at the crime scene. One bloody leather glove was found near the victims, with a matching glove found behind O.J. Simpson's guest house. Now, those gloves also contain genetic markers connected to Simpson and the two victims.
They planted the evidence. Now, that's exactly what they did. Like Johnny Cochran said, it was a rush to judgment.
Bullshit.
And actually, most of the defense lawyers I know and several of the criminal judges I know at the time who looked at this said they had probable cause to indict Fuhrman, but they didn't.
Mark didn't kill Nicole.
And who was it that cut their throats ear to ear and pulled the tongue out? And who was it that just hit the same death blow to each of them? So actually, from some of the courtroom personnel and a couple of judges who peeped in on the trial, they said they didn't have anything on O.J. And they agreed with me. It was Nancy Grace that just lied and said there was something on O.J. because she was trying to make her way. This was her first assignment, and she wanted to ensure her career in television.
experience, knowledge, and a passion for the truth.
I'm protecting womanhood and promoting manhood.
Was nearly decapitated. Her throat was slit from ear to ear. Actually, only the skin at the nape of the neck, the back of the neck, was holding her head on. Her neck bone had actually been nicked with the knife. The cut went that far through her neck.
Where are you going with this? Nancy Grace said O.J. killed Nicole and Rod Goldman.
We won't have to talk about it anymore.
Just did you do it?
No, I didn't. Nope. Did not do it.
Plus, I met him. He wasn't that kind of guy. I knew him from college. He used to hang around with somebody I knew, and everybody used to play cards. He and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and O.J. and some of the athletes and some of the professors, black, they'd all meet up, be out in Santa Monica right on the beach. Somebody had a big 5-bedroom sprawling house. We used to hang out there. He's not that kind of guy.